Hello, everybody. This is Nick Vlahos with Nick in the Morning, the podcast here at pjstar.com and other points elsewhere in cyberspace. And we've been off for a few weeks because of the Christmas holiday and the flu and just being busy. You know how that is. And
just chilling.
Yeah, well, freezing more than chilling. I think that's the problem. But we're back today, and we are back with longtime Journal Star columnist Phil Luciano. And thank you for being here, Phil.
Thanks for letting me do something that doesn't involve actually working.
I know, it's pretty easy, isn't it? We just sit around and talk to each other.
Just sit around and look handsome. That's what you told me.
Well, we're going to be sitting here a long time if that's the case.
That's fine.
But
it's working.
I just wanted to have you on today just to talk a little bit about your career, a little bit about what you've done here at the paper, what you're going to be doing down the road, perhaps, some of your favorite moments, some of your not so favorite moments. Just all that sort of thing.
All righty.
So why don't you fill us in a little bit about your background? Where are you from, and how did you get started in this business?
From the north side of Chicago, northwest side. I grew up after that in Hanover Park, which is sort of the maybe one of the slum suburbs next to Schaumburg outside Chicago. And after grad school, I applied to 33 of the biggest papers in America. When they told me to take a hike, I thought, Peoria, they're hiring. Why not try there? And boom, here I landed 30 summers ago.
I was going to say, I think you started a couple of months after I did, back in '88.
You beat me through the door.
That'll give me that much of seniority if, it comes down to like manpower time or whatever you want to say. But what made you get into, were you a journalism major in college? You went to Northern Illinois, correct?
Yeah, at first I wasn't because I went there as a business major. It was I think it still is, a really good business school. Like back then ranked like number 9th. Yeah. And I just went, because my high school girlfriend went there. And then she dumped me the day before the first day of classes. And then I'm like, hey, I'm at this school. What am I going to do? And true story. I'm in class. It's about maybe the third week, and it was one of a stats class or an econ class or one of those real thinky math/business classes, right? And I went to the library, and I remember because it was one of 5 times I went to the library when I was an undergrad, and I spent like 3 or 4 hours doing this. I kept saying, "Just get through it, man. Just get through it. You'll never have to do this the rest of your life." And so I did it. Went to class, opened the book, sat down. The TA walks in and says, "I hope you liked what you're doing for this assignment because you'll be doing it the rest of your life." I stared at him. I looked down. I looked at him. I looked down. I closed the book, went to the business school, withdrew, and then went and played softball with my friends for like the next 2 years.
the lost period.
Yeah, right. And then eventually this newspaper came out every day on campus, and I kept always thinking, well, maybe I should go over there. And finally it was like, I've got to get a major. So I went over there, and it seemed to be a pretty reasonable and not too difficult way to make a living. So boom, I enrolled in the J school.
Had anything about writing appealed to you before that?
Maybe a little. I mean, I could do it okay. I mean, in high school, kind of just bamboozled my way through there and through some English classes in college, just knowing how to write, just because I read all the time as I was a kid. So I didn't really think necessarily about doing it for a living. But after going there and, in all honesty, you write and you end up on the front page a couple times, and then you realize, man, you can kick people's butts when they deserve it and need to be, and there's no heavy lifting. I can do this the rest of my life.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty easy gig, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not unreasonable, put it that way.
So when you got done at Northern, then you went to graduate school, right? Did you apply for jobs like right away when you get out of Northern, or did you decide I need another year or two of seasoning?
I thought I was probably going to go to grad school because it was like '88. If you remember, it was a really, really hard time in newspapering. We say now fondly that was the hard time. And
looks like a picnic by comparison.
Yeah. But it was tough, and I figured I'd probably go to this program that was at Sangamon State, which used to exist, a school that used to exist. But then I went in between to this little. It was a paper, a daily in upstate New York, a place called Glens Falls, which makes Creve Coeur seem like Paris. But it was just it was a tough industrial town. It was a decent paper, and I just worked there for a while, and then I got accepted to grad school. Said, "See you later."
What was it like working in upstate New York? I mean, what did you do? What did you cover?
Oh, man, it was everything. I was like their first intern ever. And so I did everything like every intern does, school boards, cops, whatever. But it was a really depressed industrial town, and I don't think I'd ever been really exposed to something like that before. So there was a lot of people who were really, really disheveled, and they're pessimistic. I mean, the local chemical plant was shutting down, and it was you think of upstate New York a lot of times. You think, oh, the Finger Lakes, and those were around there, but not in this little part we were at. So it kind of gave me a really good education for the brief time I was there about what it really means to struggle through hard times. I mean, I knew I was a short timer, but I'd go have a beer, I'd go get a haircut, and you'd hear these people who'd been going through, they'd had these jobs for years and years and years, and all of a sudden that's like, where'd my job go? Where am I going to do? And I'm like, whoa, this is real life.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of empathy.
Right.
It also probably prepares you a little bit for what, some of the stuff that's happened in Peoria the last 30 years, too.
Sure.
What do you do for fun in a place like Glens Falls when you're 22, 23 years old?
Well, there was Saratoga Springs, which is where they have the horse racing and I think there's a college there. And so there's a lot of young people with a lot of money. So on those few occasions we had money, we'd go there, or maybe Albany, and hang out there. But man, I was an intern. I didn't have any dough, so I'd usually get like a 12-pack of Utica Club, which was their version of the Pabst, I guess you'd call it, and watch some television with some dudes.
Sounds mighty tasty.
Yeah. I was getting through the young period.
Let me excuse me. So after you were in Glens Falls and after you were in the program at Sangamon State, that's when you applied to the 33 papers, and then you decided, I'm going to ratchet down my search a little bit. How did Peoria come about? How did they come about?
Well, I was there were two people in my program, and they had gotten job interviews at Peoria, and I kind of knew that Peoria existed, and I'm not being rude. I just, a Chicago guy, it's downstate. There's Joliet, and then there's Kentucky, and so there's stuff in between, and so I was like, well, you mind if I go with along the way? And they go, okay. And so I went with, and I did that week. I hurried up and had to send it. Back then you had to send things in the mail, my stuff. And I showed up and just kind of wandered in. And I walked over to the managing editor, and she said, and I said, hey, I'm here for that job interview. And she's like, oh, are you Paul Lucchese? And I'm like, yeah, I think you have my, I said, I didn't quite lie. I said, I think you have my stuff. And she's looking, Paul Lucchese, Phil Luciano? I'm like, yes. So it was kind of a little fudgy.
This was with Marge Fanning?
Yes, it was. And I interviewed with her, and they shuffled me along to a couple more people. I noticed the other two people I was with, they did not get shuffled along. And so a couple days later, they offered me a job. And in between, I was offered a job in Florida at the Sarasota paper. Florida, where it's warm, and it's warm. And for some reason, I said, Peoria, that's where I need to be. And so I don't know what happened to Paul Lucchese, though. Hopefully he's still not out there looking for me somewhere.
Maybe Paul Lucchese got a job in Sarasota.
Probably. He's probably laughing his tail off at me.
Sitting on the beach right now.
There's that chump. Hey, good luck, Phil.
I can see that. Well, when you first started here, it was not for a columnist job, right?
Yeah, just like a lot of reporters back then would start, and probably this day still start as a police reporter. So, yeah.
How'd you end up with the column?
Well,
how long? It wasn't too long after you started.
No. Because when I came here, it was not long after Rick Baker had died. So then they had his wife took over as a columnist, and then when I started, I was doing cop stuff, but they also would have me do things at night, like Pinocchio on Ice, and I was flabbergasted. I was not like a diva or anything, but I'm like, I've got my denim jacket and my Led Zeppelin pin and my Converse high tops, and I'd be like Pinocchio on Ice or some chef competition, and everyone's dressed to the nines, and I look like Fonzie or something, and I was totally a fish out of water. So I started writing these pieces just like I'm goofing around, like a total fish out of water type thing, and people started noticing it here. And then I wrote a few columns, and they were looking for someone who was funny, and lacking that, they hired me to do a weekly column, and then I just kept grinding along, and here I am.
So when was it when you actually started your column?
89. So it was like 9 months after I was hired.
Okay.
Which is kind of crazy to give a column to a 25-year-old.
Yeah, what'd you think when
when they first did it? I was like, somebody has lost their mind, because this doesn't, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's like people that young don't get a column because, well, people that young are kind of usually, well, at least I was kind of out of, kind of crazy. You're just, you're 25 with your head on fire, and And I was kind of like, wow, this is cool. And then I had to start writing it, and that was not as easy as I thought it might be. You know, I think there's this kind of notion that with writers, like you think of Ernest Hemingway, and you have a beer and you meet a person and you just get creative and something great comes out, and it's a lot harder than that. And I think by about a year into it, they were ready to give me a boot until I had a rather remarkable stroke of luck. And
what was that stroke of luck?
Well, I was doing I'll try to be brief here, but this is the people often say, what's the column you remember? And this is the column I remember because it saved my job, I think. Because I was trying to write. I was always trying to write, trying to be funny or interesting or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really realize at the time that the true thing that people want to read about is people. People want to read about people. And don't get in the way of an interesting story. Well, I met this gal out in Pontiac. She was Mother of the Year for U of I. Her kids had gone to U of I. She had 19 kids. 19.
Holy Moses.
Yeah, each one, no twins, natural and everything. So I'm like, well, that'll be an interesting story. It was right around Mother's Day, okay? It was like graduation time. So I'm like, well, who's a bigger mom than this? The 19-child mom, right? So I went out there, and we had this really interesting conversation. It was just her and maybe one or two of her kids. The last kid was probably like in high school, 17 by then. And she said, the one thing I regret, she's totally nice lady, really super nice, like June Cleaver almost nice. And she said, the one thing I regret is my husband, he had to quit U of I 3 hours short of getting his diploma because he had a job offer and we just started having all these kids and he had to jump on that job and he never had a chance to go back and get that degree. And she goes, and now he's out in California and he has cancer and he doesn't have a long time to live. Again, I'm this guy in this Led Zeppelin pin on my denim jacket, jeans, Converse, and I go, I'll get him that diploma. And I looked over my shoulder like, who said that? Where did
that come from? Right?
I think I stole that from like Pride of the Yankees. I'll hit 2 home. Babe Ruth said he did 1 home run. I'll hit 2 for you, little Jimmy. Whatever. And after I said it, I was like, how am I going to do this? Well, I'll fast forward this, and this is, it was 89 or 90, something like that, 90 probably. And back then, the communications, if you wanted to talk to someone, it was on the phone, or you would have to go there. Mm-hmm. And so U of I didn't give honorary baccalaureates, but they said he's 3 hours short, but he did most of the work. If you show that he's done another class, then maybe we can give him a diploma. And then I told that to the wife. And then she said, well, he did take a class at ISU, but he had to stop short because, again, he had to go to work again. Mm-hmm. So I contacted ISU. And they said, if he ever showed proficiency in teaching, I think it was computers, whatever this class was, we can give him credit for that. And then one of his relatives said, well, in California, he was out there for some reason. He taught some classes, and it was like a mousetrap game, like one thing to the other. And I was like, if this all lines up, and I couldn't believe it, it all lined up. There was proof of he taught this one class in California, and this was brought over to ISU, and the ISU stuff. I mean, literally was taking this to each place and handed off. And 2 days, it was about a week before graduation, U of I said he qualified. He can have his diploma. And I'm like, that'll be great. And I told the wife, and she's like, yeah, he can't come. And I'm like, well, why? Well, he was in such bad shape. He had tubes and oxygen, all this all over him. He couldn't get on a commercial plane. And even if he would, it would be like if anything went wrong.
It would be way too traumatic.
Yeah, for him to do anything. And so remember, this was on the very tail end of call it the golden or silver age of newspaper publishers, when Henry Slane still walked these halls, right?
God bless him.
Henry was just, always, had a cigar in his mouth and a story on his lips, and generous in ways he liked to keep quiet. And he heard about that. He's like, private plane, I can do that. And it probably cost him 10 grand because it was like he did it like 2 days later. And I couldn't believe it. So I go to U of I, and I'm waiting, and I talk to he was this tiny little old man, and he had all these tubes. And I said, his name is George Monacle. I said, Mr. Monacle, I go, how are you feeling? He goes, pretty good. I was like, wow, he doesn't have in good shape. But he was smiling, and went to the graduation ceremony, and the first one they called was his name, and the place just goes bonkers, because word got out about this whole story, and everyone's cheering. They took him out, and I left right after that, and as I was leaving, I saw him. He's in the back seat of a sedan. He just kind of waved out the back, and he hung out in central Illinois for about 10 days, and then he passed away. And I felt so bad, like, did I hasten this guy's demise? And I talked to his wife. She's like, oh, no, these were like the 10 best days of his life. And I was like, whoa.
It's got to give you a good feeling.
Well, it was, and not to be crass, kind of saved the job too, because I wrote about all this stuff along the way. But more to the point, I did learn people just want to read stories about people, about interesting people, everyday people who have unique things happen to them, that sort of thing. So that kind of turned the whole career around, I'd say.
How easy or difficult is it to come up with column subjects every day? I mean, you're writing how many columns a week?
It depends, but a lot of times if I'm working 5 days, I'll write 5. It's challenging. It's I know you're from Chicago, and you used to watch Bozo Circus religiously, I hope. Yes,
absolutely.
And the job to me all the time, the image literally comes to mind multiple times every week, is remember the dude who would come out spinning the plates? Which is like the kind of the lamest circus thing in the world. And you'd see it like every 2 weeks. There'd be the plate spinner guy, and you just keep spinning plates and trying that they don't. And you try to get them all up, and then you try to make sure they don't fall. And that's what it feels like. Just kind of get plates up there and get them spinning, and then you kind of got to go back and forth, and then on to the next and on to the next. And people will say, and I'm not saying I'm like the most prolific writer on earth, but people will say, "Hey, I like that column," and I go, boy, I kind of forget when. He goes, the one 2 days ago. And I literally, it's so far away from mine because I'm like 2 days ahead by that point.
It's like you're always feeding the beast in some ways.
Oh, it's something. It's interesting. It's interesting. But luckily, the people who read the paper have lots of ideas. Lots of ideas that I can't print because they involve their lack of appreciation for what I write. But actually, they come up with a lot of the ideas. So
yeah, I was going to say, how much of the columns you write, how many of them are your own thoughts, and how many are suggested by a reader somewhere?
Boy, I'd say it's probably I don't know. And it could be like 60% me, 40% them, or something like that. It just depends. Like if something happens like this week, when I knew Jim Thome was up for the Hall of Fame. I just didn't realize it was this week. And then I should really think these things out a little farther. I should keep a notebook or something.
Deadline pressure is always a good thing.
Yeah. But then I was like Monday morning. I get up. I'm like a total loon. I get up at like 3 or 3:30 in the morning and start looking. I'm like, oh, Thome, it's this week. Well, how about something about Jim Thome? Because I'm lucky enough to know some of his friends. So that was a real kind of obvious type thing to me, what those guys are thinking of. But readers come up with a lot of interesting stuff too.
What is, of all the columns you've written, and how many have you written? Have you ever gone through and added them up?
I think when I'd hit 25 years, which was like 4 or so years ago, we estimated it was like 5,000 just columns. Yeah, in addition to the other stuff that I crank out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not just doing columns, you're doing other stories too.
Reviews, stories, what have you.
Yeah, of all those columns, I mean, which one do you think has gotten the most response from the readership? Is there any way you can tell?
From what I recall, and it's different now because now you can kind of calibrate. We can totally calibrate what we get online and whatnot. But the two that I recall as getting the most response, and these are kind of really unimportant. I don't know what makes for an important column because the next day is the next newspaper, and it's old news. One was when the Juggalos came here, if you remember that.
Insane Clown Posse, yes, indeed.
And I wrote a column about them that was on. I kind of was talking out of both sides of my mouth, which is kind of hard to do, but I managed it this time. On one hand, I was kind of making fun of Peoria for being so scared of these Juggalos. At the same time, I was making fun of the Juggalos for being a bunch of goofs. And the amount of email and calls I got, mostly from the Juggalos, these fans, just calling me a total this and that, and I don't get it, and they want to meet me and this, and I'm like, here's my address, come visit me, One News Plaza, here's a map.
And here you thought the Juggalos couldn't read. Yeah. Oh, no, let's not start that. Don't write us, please. Just a joke.
Nick Vlahos said that. All you Juggalos watching this, I'm sure there are many. But it just was one of those things that they just went berserk. They're a feisty tribe, I guess, whatever. The other was when Bradley made it to, was it the Sweet 16?
Was in 2006.
Okay, whatever that was. I forget what the year that they made it, and they were going to play Kansas. And I wrote this column making fun of Kansas, the town where, I don't even remember, is it Lawrence?
Yeah.
I think the biggest hero of, if I remember this, is Hugh Beaumont of Leave It to Beaver fame. Our second reference to Leave It to Beaver in this.
Did not realize that he was from Lawrence.
I believe, yes. And it was just I would say, gentle to moderate prodding about this town, this school. I made fun of the rock chalk chant that they do and this. But it wasn't like, you're going to die, you SOBs. It was just like poking them because, of course, there's no way Bradley was going to win. And they did.
And they won. Yes.
But man, even before they won, after they won, it was silent. But before that, it was like, oh my! And I was totally like just laughing my head at, because it was the amount of venom from that school. They were so mad, and it's like, how dare you disparage us in any way? I'm like, come on, it's a basketball game. But they're crazy. It's like the Philadelphia Eagles of that fans of that era.
I'm a Mizzou grad, so yes, I know fully well about the KU
golly.
thing, and yes, I can confirm that they are definitely that way, especially when it comes to Missouri too.
Yeah, I knew they were rabid. I didn't know they were homicidal. But.
Well, they're an interesting bunch, to say the least. You were talking about your column that you wrote about the gentleman from California with his degree. What are some of your other favorite things that you've written over the years, or the favorite people that you've encountered over the years? Let's go with things first. What are your favorite columns that you've written?
Well, I can talk about categories of the things I like. That some might come to mind as I'm talking. One thing I take pride in, I guess, is I tend to chronicle a lot of historical stuff. I just like older stuff. Mm-hmm. So if there's like a place that's old, or maybe it's like an old barber or something like that, I try to chronicle, like, hey, this guy's been in business for 50 years or things like that. I also, whenever I can, I know maybe this sounds kind of Sunday schoolish, but whenever I can help people who are really in a messed up situation, that's the type of stuff I most like to do. So. Well,
you do a lot of work with the whole Jimmy Binkley Christmas thing and that sort of thing too. How did that all get started?
Well, Jimmy was just an amazing guy. He also was pretty smart. I mean, he was very talented, and we know he was very benevolent, going to the nursing homes. Yeah. I mean, but that guy, people didn't realize he did it like 3 times a week, 3 nursing homes per, and he got like $20 a shot, which barely covered gas in an old sedan, and he was just incredible. And he also was a pretty good marketer too. One year he called me, he's like, "How's the best looking guy in Peoria?" Which is a line I immediately suspected and later verified he used on every guy he needed a favor from, which is fine. And he told me about what's going on. I wrote a column about, hey, anyone want to help him out? And it kind of mushroomed to help more and more, and I helped more and more. And then toward the latter part, what turned out to be the latter part of his life, he was really worried about would anyone be able to keep his efforts going. Well, of course not, because no one can do what he did. True. But at least with the Christmas party, that some of us have been able to keep that going. But it's becoming bigger now, and it's growing to, literally hundreds and hundreds of people, and it's kids, it's older people, it's homeless people, it's all these people who get gifts and these little bits of as I call them, just touches at Christmas. And I don't know what to do next year. I'm gonna need more elves, a bigger house, something.
Well, how did it go this past Christmas?
Oh, it's fantastic. And West Peoria, the city of West Peoria, is nice enough where they're the intake point, their city hall, and then they store the stuff at their city garage, because I don't have enough room literally in my house to keep all the stuff.
To clarify for people who may not know,
sorry,
this is like they can go ahead and explain exactly goes on.
For the Binkley party, they give like usable or useful gifts, notions like lotion, socks, shaving cream, that kind of stuff, or like writing stuff, things that older folks can use, and then lots and lots and lots of teddy bears and stuffed animals. And so, but I get all sorts of stuff to the point where it's so much clothes and teddy bears that we've expanded this to, like, we make gift bags. Hundreds of seniors, but then for a couple shelters, kids, Carver Center. It's just all over the place.
How many people did you distribute stuff to this year? Do you have any idea?
You'd think I'd count something like that, wouldn't you? It's probably around 1,000. Wow. So yeah,
it's pretty solid.
It's cool. It's cool. It's a fun thing to do. So yeah, I'll be hiring elves soon.
Do they have to dress up like an elf too, or is it?
I encourage it, but it's not mandatory.
Jimmy, I'm sure, is on this list, but who are some of your favorite Peoria area people that you've met in the course of your 3 decades on this job?
Well, I would say the first one that comes to mind that was one of my favorites was Pete Vanaken, just because he was such a super nice guy. There are people, I know you knew Pete, that it's one of those things where, and I want to say this in a nice way, that there are people who are nice and they're nice because when they're professionally nice or they want to be nice. Pete was just this great guy.
Yeah.
He was just like, there he is, and how you doing, and keep swinging and all that stuff. And he was just, I just like to be around that guy. And and Pete comes to mind, and I was talking to someone here in the newsroom about this the other day, is that, there were guys like, love him, not love him, whatever. I mean, you had guys like Jim Maloof, and even I think of George Shatter, who's still with us, but he's not in the spotlight anymore. And other people of that era and of that type, they were characters, or these people were characters too. They said what they meant and meant what they said and that sort of thing. And there are no characters anymore. There just aren't. I just don't think public life is conducive to that anymore. I think you're supposed to be really stripped down, buttoned down, quiet. You're not supposed to be, think of Gary Sandberg. He certainly was a character. And you have people who will speak their mind. I mean, the city council, school board, but not like Sandberg, not shooting from the hip like that. And it's not just Peoria, it's everywhere. They just don't have characters anymore. And I kind of miss that. I think Peoria misses that, I
think that's always a good thing I think a community needs characters.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily self-promoters, but you have just people who do things a little differently, who make their points a little differently. And we had so many of them for such a long time here.
Right.
They were really, not just in Peoria, but also, guys like Pete Van Aken became famous all over the country.
Right.
Because of his affiliation with Harry Carey and that sort of thing, too. And you're right. Gary Sandberg, you can say that, how much got done around the city council when he was there, but at the same time, you never missed a meeting. And he always spoke for a lot of people that probably didn't have a voice, and he did it pretty well, too. You don't really see that much anymore.
And people still, they rue that he died because, and I mean no disparagement to the current council, but people really felt that he spoke for them. Now, granted, I told him once, I said, you know what they're going to put on your tombstone? 10-1. 10-1, because that's the vote.
It was always the vote.
That's the vote. You're number one, But it's still, it's part of governance is just being, connecting to people. And if he made people feel a little bit better about where they live, well, hey, that's a good thing.
Well, what are your thoughts on the current leadership in our area right now? And not just in Peoria, but maybe just regionally. I'm not talking about nationally. I don't want to get into that. But just as far as, Mayor Artis or some of our state representatives or some of our legislators, what do you think of them personally and professionally, I guess?
Well, professionally, this would be a period of time where, and I don't know if it might even be worse than when Jim Maloof was in his first or second term, because remember it was like last person to leave Peoria, shut out the lights type thing. But at least then you kind of, frankly, Peoria had nowhere to go but up. Hey, let's pull up our bootstraps and get going. Right now, I think Peoria and nationally, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy. I'm trying to answer this on point as I can. The economics of this country are so peculiar in that now everything is focused on Wall Street. And I don't want to just pick on Caterpillar, but you saw what happened with Caterpillar. It's, my belief is that if the current climate was going on 20, 30 years ago, and I know it's hard to transfer one period to another, but back then, granted, the UAW and Caterpillar didn't always get along, but they were like on the old Andy Griffith show, or one of those shows where you had the guy, the wife, and the older wife and the older husband. They'd yell at each other and threaten each other, but you knew at the end of the show they were going to be getting along. And that's how the UAW and Caterpillar were, and each knew their place. The management was going to make more money, but the UAW was going to make some decent money, and they were in it together. And along the way, I think what divided them was this thing in America now where it's Wall Street is king. Wall Street's always been there, but now it's dividends, shareholders, and it's formed this rift, and that's why I think it would be such a hard time right now because you're at the mercy of getting people to come to a town to set up shop. And I think it's harder than ever. So that's where I'm trying to answer your question is doing that now is just extremely hard. So it's hard for me to say good, bad. I don't think anyone's doing a bad job. I get along with the mayor fine, I think. He might differ. Depending on the day. Now we get along fine. Old rugby players. But it's just very challenging right now.
Are you still in a state of shock about seeing the Deerfield dateline on Caterpillar stories as opposed to Peoria dateline?
It's weird, man. It is. It's weird, and this is going to sound kind of crazy. I've gotten a couple emailings recently about stuff that has happened, either has happened or it's alleged to have happened at other caterpillars, like in this country or that state. And then I kind of start analyzing it. Maybe there's a story either by me or someone else. And then I think, well, wait a minute. Peoria is no longer the headquarters. Is this even a story in Peoria? And that's kind of weird. That's kind of weird because normally it would have been because, hey, everything that happens to Caterpillar is coming out of Peoria, but now it's not. So do I care about Panama?
Yeah, that's it. How much do you care about Caterpillar now because the headquarters isn't here?
Yeah,
There's still thousands of employees that work
right,
here.
Them, yes. But I mean, what's going on in the other Caterpillars across the globe? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, as a reporter and as a newspaper, do we cover that stuff anymore? I don't know.
What do you think is going to be the future of Caterpillar in this community?
Well, I think someone's got to make tractors for a while, and they're being made here. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they got moved more and more away because that's what's been going on. So I don't know how. I would like to think that if Caterpillar totally was going to push the button and eject out of here, they wouldn't have tried to make nice with Peoria by trying to help with the OSF relocation.
And I'll give them credit where it's due. They
Right.
really came through like champs on that whole situation.
If it were a situation where it's like, you know what, we're going to Chicago for a few years, then we're going to bail to Texas, and then we're going to, I don't know, relocate on Mars, wherever, they wouldn't have done anything with OSF. I don't think. I'd like to think that. So I hope they're sticking around, you know. But this is that one part about Peoria. I mean, Peoria, you know, there was this place called Peoria that was the distillery capital of the world.
Yep.
I mean, we know that, we see that, and those distilleries left 100 years ago. Most of them, they vanished because of Prohibition. It's been almost 100 years now that most of those distilleries left. And, you know, back then you might have been saying the same things we say right now about, well, what's going to happen? If Caterpillar goes, what are going to happen? If the distilleries go, what's going to happen? Well, Peoria's still around. So, I mean, there are ways you can still survive even when your main meal ticket blows away. And I'm not saying Caterpillar's blown away, but certainly it's diminished. And now with the, you know, with the medicine and the other things that's trying to hook onto medicine, you know, maybe this has become this great big, it already is a pretty big medical complex. Hopefully it just keeps growing and growing that way.
What do you think the state is of our community right now?
Well, I think there is that upswing. I mean, it's, you know, it's been kind of this slow development a little bit toward the south of downtown, but it's pretty cool down there. You know what I mean? And then at Peoria Heights, that's pretty darn cool. I mean, this is, you know, I don't know, when you got here, I know when you got here in like '88, when I had never been here. I'd been to St. Louis before, and I'm like, hey, it's a river town. It's going to be a fun place to be, and there'll be all these places up and down the river. And I got here, and there was Barnacle Billy's, which was a great place.
Yes, yeah, nothing against Barnacle Billy's, but
no,
could use about 10 more of them.
Yes, and that's the part I was like, how come there are not restaurants up and down this river? I don't get it. And then it did start to happen. Maybe there were some detours that didn't quite work out, like the big cement block that's on the riverfront that they're ripping down. But it is not, I mean, now there are these things that are like, how do I say this, that are, I don't want to damn Peoria by saying this, but it doesn't look like Peoria. It looks like regentrified urban areas, like the near south side, and kind of to a degree in Peoria Heights looks more like a kind of like Geneva, but a little more, maybe a little glitzier kind of, sort of. So that part's looking good. I mean, and people are spending money. I mean, if we, you know, that's the part where you're like, well, this downturn because of Caterpillar, that's not good. But people are, it seems to me, spending more money on stuff like restaurants and hobnobbing around than they ever have. You know,
it seems like, you know, whenever I go out, I know it seems like places are packed, or, you know, there's a lot of people. The people that I talk to who run restaurants and bars in this town, they say they're maybe a little off, but not nearly as much as you would think, considering what's going on with Cat and that sort of thing too.
But the one thing, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
But the one thing that is just, it's just unfathomable to me. Okay, so you had this shot in a beer town, and now it's kind of changing a little bit, but it's always been a convention place, right? And downtown, the nerve center of this supposed convention town. No offense to the bars that are there, but it's like a gape-tooth wonder. I mean, yes, there's going to be what's the place that's coming in?
Rumburgers.
They're coming into the corner. But that's been a million places for over so many years, and there's 2 slots next to it that are open. And the owners of the other bars have wondered for a long time, like, are they going to knock this down? Are they going to rebuild it? What are they going to do? Are they going to put a hotel there? And it's like, holy smokes, this is ground zero. How does Peoria not have a better grasp of this block, the convention, nerve center? And
that absolutely drives me crazy. I mean, you walk out of the Pear Marquette, and what do you see? You see this big hulk of a building across the street,
blight,
the Madison Theater, and it's basically vacant. I mean, there's a couple of places in there. You got hoops, and you got the judge's chamber, but other than that, it's just falling down. Something, and you know what? The same thing is going to happen across from OSF. You're going to walk out of that, and what do you see? You're going to see Sully's, which has been closed for, 2 years now, and the place next door to that, which has been empty. It looks like
25 years.
Yeah, I mean,
it's absurd.
It's ridiculous, and it's depressing. I mean, these guys who own these properties have got to do something with them. They've either got to sell them or they've got to rehabilitate them. Or I don't know what they're waiting for. I think they all think that there's going to be this big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it's not going to be as big as you think.
No, especially the one that's next to Sully's, too. I mean, come on. How many more years do you wait? I mean, it's been 25, 30 years.
It looks like my basement. If you look through the windows in there, stuff scattered around all over the place. It's just ridiculous.
And it's one of those things. And yeah, you're right. No offense to Hoops, which I like, or Judge's Chamber.
Same
which,
here.
Fine places, been there a long time. But it's how do you have, this is our downtown. This is the focus. And then you go around the corner and there's our focus. And this is a mess. That's got it. You think that's got to change. You can keep going toward the south, but if what they want to do is true, where hey, this medical community is going to keep growing, and I think it will, and you're going to have more and more young people coming, and I think they will. Maybe they're going to be coming to the south part, but that downtown, I don't think you can have your downtown looking like that.
You've got to there's got to be a way to at least merge Main Street with what's going on in the warehouse district. There's got to be some sort of a connector. And you know what? We all thought that Caterpillar's new headquarters maybe was going to serve that function. Maybe OSF will serve that function. Not to the same degree, perhaps, as CAT, but maybe to a lesser degree, and maybe it'll spur some other people to come down there too. But they need to do something. You cannot have 2 disjointed areas like that in one area where all your people are staying, where all the hotels are, that looks like a bomb hit it.
And plus you've got, and I forget the name, and this would be just going west of the Pier Marquette, and we know what a debacle that has been. But there are apartments going in there, and they're things are working that way and toward 3030, and then it literally is right around that one block. It's like this is like this poison cog that just has got to change. And I hate to describe the Pier Marquette like that, but I don't know. They've got to rent that stuff out. It's just got to get going.
Yeah, it has to at some point. And I don't want to change the subject too much here, but I know not too long ago you wrote some things about Charles Manson when he passed away, and before that he had a Peoria connection. Refresh my memory. What did you end up doing with those letters?
They are now, I don't know if they're on display. But
well, first of all, explain what the letters were. Yeah.
Oh, when I back in around 91, they came out with these weird comic books. And remember when this is another great thing about newspapers that's gone away, that people would, businesses would send things here all the time, CDs, books, whatever. Hey, take a look at this. Try writing about it, which is kind of cheap, but I liked it. So there were these comic books like Serial Killer #1. It was these comic books about serial, and it's kind of weird. I mean, it's quaint almost that, now if that were to happen, we'd be like, yeah, whatever. You see that on TV all the time. Back in 90 or whenever that was, it was like, how dare someone do this? This is really creepy. A comic book about serial killers. Well, the first one was about Manson. And I'm just paging through, just like, this is goofy. And I saw Peoria, and I read it, and I'm like, Peoria? And it said he was arrested for his first time in Peoria with a friend named Blackie. I'm like, I never knew that. I'll go look it up. And so I looked up, and we had a little folder on Manson in our library. Nothing about Peoria, really. Nothing that I could find at that point. And I'm like, huh. And I tried, and again, this is 90, and we're talking about he would have been in Peoria, 40 years earlier or whatever. And I tried through the courthouse, through the police department. There were no records. And plus he was a juvenile, so they probably were, tossed in a dumpster years and years ago. So I'm like, well, I'm never going to find out anything unless I go to the horse's mouth. So I wrote a letter. I talked to the assistant warden or warden out in Corcoran prison in California. He's like, oh, Manson doesn't answer any letters. He hardly answers, and he's not going to answer. Well, lo and behold, he did. And it was weird. It was very strange. And he wrote a little bit. He said, "I'll write you again." And I wrote him back one time. And to be honest, first I didn't expect anything. Second, I was like 26, so I was kind of immature, and I didn't really know what to do with this stuff. So I ran a couple columns about it, but I didn't really look at them enough. And then when he got sick about a year ago, really sick, I remember he's going to die last January. I started going through them, and I'm like, there's a lot more detail in here. And so I looked at him again, and then when he did die, I decided, well, let's run a little more about this. And then the thing that was weird is when I pulled him out the day after he died, before they seemed creepy, they seemed creepy, but I kept him around because I figured, for whatever reason, this is one of those newspaper reporter things, maybe I'll need them down the road. So
it's like that pack rat mentality that a lot of us have.
If it can't be subpoenaed, I keep it. If it can be subpoenaed, I get rid of it the next
day.
Shred it. Yes. But I don't think I'm going to get subpoenaed for Charles Manson. If I did, I'd be on, Access Hollywood. So yay, whatever. But yeah, and the day after he died, all of a sudden it went from creepy to really, really, really creepy, because it was Charles Manson, and he's dead, and there's really no reason I'm ever going to write about this guy again. What do I do with it? So I wrote, what do I do with these things? And, just tossed it out to readers. And I thought about just throwing them away, which seemed almost a justified type thing. This guy's creepy and murderer. Let's get rid of it. But then people said, well, maybe there's some use for this. People have academics and authors have studied journals of people, and you never know what might be in there that might be useful. So they're now in the hands of the Abe Lincoln Museum, which is also tied to
in Springfield? Yeah,
the Illinois State Museum, maybe somehow. All that. It's tied together. I doubt there's going to be a big Charlie Manson exhibit with,
his Peoria letters.
Right, Helter Skelter written in pig's blood or something. No, but they're there, and if you are an academic, you'll be able to read them, if that's of any use.
That connection there, and we talk about this a lot as far as people from Peoria who've gone on to big things, or people that have a Peoria connection, who've been on a national or international level. Does that amaze you at this point to see how many fingers that Peoria has in various pies?
It is weird, and we extrapolate it to Central Illinois, to different people who come from this area and attained fame in different ways. And I guess it's possible that happens the same in the greater Poughkeepsie area, the greater Muncie, Indiana area, if you look in enough places. But I don't know, man. Peoria just seems to have this magic touch about, not necessarily the greatest in every field have come here, of course, but you look. There's no 7 degrees of separation. There's usually 1 or 2 somehow, and I don't know why that is, but it surely is enchanting in a way.
Yeah, it wasn't. When I worked in Fargo, it certainly wasn't the case up there. So
that was not the center of the universe.
No,
it
wasn't. Well, it was the center of the cold universe, I think, because it never got above 30 below zero most of the winter. You've been here 30 years almost. You've probably had opportunities to go to other places, other papers. Why'd you stick around?
Got to work somewhere. And I don't know. I just follow whatever needs to be done in my life, and there's other things I do. I'm connected to a really solid church, Riverside Church. I'm connected to the Dream Center, and there are things there. My wife and I have a really great house we like. That's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know. There's just all these other things that I don't know I could replace to make better. You know what I mean?
Well, now that you're officially a part of the community, and I know some people, it's like you'll never, unless you were born and raised here, you'll never be a part of the Peoria community, but I think we probably are at this point. What do you see for this town 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road?
Oh, like we were talking about with the medical aspect, I hope it keeps going that way. I hope it keeps moving toward that direction. There might be something else that comes out tomorrow. Maybe someone, strikes oil in Bartonville, whatever. And
Jed Clampett.
It becomes like Norway. It's like, hey, we're all rich. I don't know. I doubt that'll happen. Maybe someone will harness those stupid Asian carp in some way. I doubt that'll happen. But that's another, that kind of stuff is crazy, stuff like Asian carp, stuff like the Hubcap House, stuff like Willie York. It's like, I don't know, man, that you just don't have that kind of crazy. I don't mean it a bad way. Well, maybe sometimes, but crazy, weird, interesting. I don't think you have that in other towns. I mean, we're both from Chicago, and they've got interesting people there, but not like the mix that's around here or Goofy Ridge or name another, nutty burg around here. And it's got plenty to keep you entertained.
It's a great news town.
Yeah.
There's never been any shortage of anything, at least to write about for the most part, as you can probably attest to the 5,000 columns you've written.
But always willing to take more ideas.
That's right. Yeah, we need to keep that well going.
Open for business.
Is there anything I'm not asking about here that I ought to be asking you about?
Oh, man. P. Luciano at pjstar.com. Send those ideas.
Yep, and send him the hate mail too, okay? Leave my name out of it. Phil Luciano from the Journal-Star, thank you very much for being here today. And thank you for listening and watching on Nick in the Morning, the podcast. We'll see you the next time. Thanks a lot.